Greetings everyone and welcome to Brickcats. Today I am reviewing the Tantive 4 or Rebel Blockade Runner designed by McPhatty. As always, please consider leaving a like, subscribing to the channel, leaving a comment, or supporting what I do in any other way you see fit. I greatly appreciate it. The Corellian Engineering Corporation CR90 Tantive 4 belonged to the Organa family and saw service during the Clone Wars through the early stages of the Galactic Civil War. It escaped the Battle of Scarif with the Death Star plans, and ultimately was captured over Tatooine by the Devastator. Perhaps somewhat implausibly, apparently the Corvette we see in the Battle of Exegol is also the Tantive 4, and the backstory there is that it was recovered by a sympathetic former Imperial senator. Generic versions of the CR90 were used widely throughout the galaxy, and it was prized for its versatility and adaptability to a number of different mission profiles. Without any substitutions, Bricklink was giving me 4 stores and $170 before shipping and tax, or about $206 including shipping and tax. In my reviews, I offer my opinions on aesthetics and model features, parts issues you might want to look out for, the build experience, the model's integrity, and I close out with my overall impression and pricing information in the conclusion. If you're watching this review, I assume you have bought the instructions or are interested in buying them. I also assume a basic level of familiarity with LEGO nomenclature and Bricklink's ordering system. I create these reviews for my own personal enjoyment, and in the hopes that my advice will make your experience more enjoyable and or less expensive. And as an admin note, I am a little sick right now, which is why my voice sounds funny, and I'm also using my floor setup, so it's a little more awkward to move this around. But hopefully this will be fine. The Tantive 4 measures approximately 22.5 inches long by 7.25 inches wide, and it sits 5.25 inches off the display surface on the included stand. And off the stand, it's about 4.25 inches tall. In my research, I was able to fairly easily determine the cannon length of the ship at 150 meters, although there is some minor variation depending on the source, but I wasn't able to find any solid measurements of the height or the width of the ship. So regardless, I think the overall proportions look really good to me, and perhaps the only section that I think might be a little too big is this middle section right here. Starting up front, the Hammerhead Bridge is probably one of the 2 defining characteristics of the CR90 line, the other being the large engine block at the rear. And I really like how the designer constructed this. The stepped method with the curved slopes is simple but effective, and it makes the removable top, more on that later, it's much more sturdy than if this was an angled subassembly here. The dark red highlights, as well as some minimal greebling, capture the features of the bridge section very well in my opinion, and these 2 rounded plates right at the front here were pretty much perfect for the features we see on the film model. The dorsal and the ventral turbo lasers can be rotated on this hollow stud, and they look fine. And the red stripe continues down the port side of the ship, but if we turn this around, that is not replicated down the starboard side. I wasn't able to find any images of the ship without this red stripe on the starboard side here, and in Rogue One it definitely has it. I haven't made it all the way through Rebels yet, so it's possible the color scheme changed slightly. Either way, this is easy to correct or change to dark red if you really want to. You just duplicate the 1x4 dark red tile, a 1x1 dark red cheese slope, and a 1x2 dark red curved slope, and replace these white ones here. The next section to the rear has the 4 topside cannons, and these little assemblies are also apparently armed high-capacity escape pods, which I did not know before. And this section is mostly accurately represented. I think the only thing that I would have probably done differently was added a wedge piece at the back here, as this section is supposed to be angled like that. But I do appreciate that this section at the front, this leading edge here, is accurately represented with the 2 different angles on the leading edge there. On the underside of the same section, there are representations of the smaller escape pods, and there are 2 on each side instead of the 4 we see in canon. And the reason for this is that these escape pods have been designed to be removable. The rubber bands don't come in a better color than white, unfortunately, but they do provide enough friction to hold them in place while the model is sitting flat. And I think while I personally would have preferred accuracy over the play value of these escape pods, they are well done, aside from one little issue I'll talk about in the part section, and they fit inside their little ports very nicely and don't fall out. They also look pretty good as well, even though I think they might be a little too big for this scale, but I actually don't think it's possible to go any smaller without it looking kind of unusual, and you're limited by the parts inventory as well. The red highlights continue into the next section, and these diagonal fins are nicely done with toe ball connections on both the top and the bottom of the ship. The sensor array is very simple but effective, and this one I kind of wish it was on a actual turntable piece because we do see this rotating in canon, but you can move this around fairly easily. To either side are the main airlocks, made with bracket construction and curved slopes. And then there's a small section behind the airlocks with these additional angled fin structures before transitioning back into the engines. The 11 engines are all built around the 2x4 half cylinder elements, and I think this is the most reasonable choice as they're the perfect size and the scale. The only real downside is that they're really smooth, and at least in this model it does contrast pretty sharply with the rest of the ship. So lots of smooth stuff here, but as you can see, there's lots of studs on the rest of it. This would be a prime location, in my opinion, to repurpose some stickers or put on some replica stickers just to give the cylinder pieces a little bit more texture. And I was actually trying to think of a logical choice for a set with stickers, but I couldn't really think of anything. The problem with Star Wars is that most of these stickers are light bluish gray or some kind of gray, and that's not really what you want. So if you got any ideas on a set that has some white Greebling type stickers, please let me know, and I'll certainly see if I can buy some and add them. In any case, the engine block looks really good in my opinion, and it has a nice level of greebling on the visible surfaces, including on the sides here. The studs themselves add a good bit of texture, at least to this front edge here. And there are 2 things that I think could be a little bit better, very minor. And the first would be to fill out the back sections more so that the engines maintain a more or less consistent diameter when viewed in profile like this. And what I'm talking about is you can see that the cylinder piece is, 4 studs wide, but then it narrows down to, I don't know, maybe 3, 2.5 or 3. And I think that if you just built out this a little bit more such that the line of the cylinder continued more or less right into this section here, that would probably be a little bit more accurate. I just feel like this gap is a bit too large. And second, the other minor thing was this 3x3 section kind of stuck out at me as you're looking at this. And I think the slope 33 3x3 double, part 3675 in white would be a nice addition here on the bottom, both for appearance's sake, and it would also strengthen this connection to this bottom engine here. Unfortunately, there's no inverted counterpart for that wedge, so perhaps another 2x3 inverted slope would work well on the top here. The model does include the red highlights on the opposite engines, both here and here. And I like this choice of wheel as well. The engines in canon definitely have a good amount of space around where you see the engine glow, and I think this wheel and the boat stud represent that very well. Flipping the ship over and removing the stand for a second. There is a higher percentage of anti-studs, but not too bad, and this is pretty much what you'd expect, and I think this looks pretty good from the bottom. The section between the escape pods, I think, could be a little bit more accurate. This is the section I'm talking about, by mirroring what they have on the top section. This is supposed to be angled in, essentially, turn this around. It should be more or less the same as this. But I understand the compromise, and having a single 4x12 plate here definitely adds some structural strength as well. You saw it a bit earlier, the stand is very simple but serves its purpose well. I found it to be a bit short to my liking. As specified, you only are supposed to buy this brick, but I added 3 more 2x2 bricks to make it a little bit higher. And you could customize this even further if you wanted to. I'm not sure I would go too high, just because that starts to get unstable. But this is also wide enough to display one of those 8x16 tiles with a custom placard on it if you wanted to. Somewhat unusually for a model at this scale, the designer has created more or less a full interior along with some microscale figures. If you've been following the channel for a while, you probably know I'm pretty indifferent to interiors, but I will fully admit I think this one was pretty cool. And there are 4 main interior sections you can access. So starting with the bridge, remove this piece on the top here. And there are some representations of the rebel pilots, along with perhaps the captain here, with some instrument panels and seats for the various stations that the crew would sit at. Next, we remove this larger section back here. And this space is identified as the VIP state quarters, in this case the Organas. And as specified, this looks more like a control station to me with the printed slip there, but I guess we can all use our imagination. Lifting that section off reveals a conference room type scene. And you've got the representations of C-3PO. I think this is supposed to be Leia. Maybe this is Bail. And another crew member there. And it's a little difficult to see with the lighting, but my favorite part about this model is that the hallways to the escape pods are actually represented as well. So you can imagine R2 sneaking back here and getting into an escape pod. So very cool. And finally, moving back to the airlock section, you've got a little standoff scene here. Take this part off. So we have a representation of stormtroopers, rebel troopers here, and then very difficult to see, but Darth Vader is constructed back there as well. And these sections all fit just where they're supposed to go pretty nicely. Sometimes I have some difficulty getting this large one back in. It seems to hang on the back there, but not too bad. So that all fits back together very nicely. Moving this model around, I will say that if there's one thing I would probably like to see in a version 2, it's to better conceal some of the Technic distributed throughout the model. So you can see some Technic holes here, and these black pins aren't too bad, but on the underside, you can definitely see some of the blue 3L Technic pins that stand out pretty prominently. So you can either substitute these with black, which is what I'll probably recommend in the part session, is what I will recommend in the part session, excuse me. But overall, this is a really good looking model, and I really like having this on my desk. The parts list specifies 232 elements and 1,904 pieces, but you actually need 233 elements and 1,908 pieces. The missing elements you need are the rubber bands that hold the escape pods. For some reason they aren't included in the parts list, and I think this is actually a fairly major omission as they don't work without them. The rubber bands I use for the rubber belt small round cross section, approximately 2x2, part 70902 in white, and you need 4 of them. These wrap around the escape pods in step 203 and 228, and I was able to get them to work by just wrapping them around once, as you can see here, instead of wrapping them around twice, which is what it says in the instructions. These rubber bands don't have enough play or enough slack to wrap around twice, so I think if you do that, you'll probably ruin the rubber band or break it. That problem aside, the designer did an excellent job of avoiding rare or expensive elements. Furthermore, most of the pieces do have some visible surface due to the interior of the ship, so there aren't a whole lot of color substitutions to make, although I did find a few. The 4 brick 2x8 specified in light bluish gray, part 3007, are nearly completely hidden, and in my opinion can be in any color. It's hard for me to find them, but they're right behind this part of the middle of the engine block. Basically, right behind here. And there are a few small gaps. You might be able to see them if you look really hard from the very back. So any neutral color would definitely be fine, but honestly, unless you're looking for it, you're not going to see it, so I say just go with any color. The 2 brick modified 1x2 by 1 2/3 with studs on the side, part 22885 in light bluish gray, are hidden and can be any color. They're the connection point for this small assembly right in the middle of the engine block there. The 4 Technic Axle 2L notched, specified in red, part 32062, are hidden in the escape pods, and the black version obviously works equally well. The Technic Pin 3L with friction ridges, part 6558, are specified and are most common in blue. However, as I pointed out, some of these are actually quite visible, and black would be more discreet. There's only 18 of them, so while you'll likely pay a bit more for the black ones instead of the blue ones, I do think it's worth it to cover or to make these a little bit less prominent. The 26 brick modified 1x2 with studs on side, part 11211 in light bluish gray, are effectively completely hidden and in my opinion can be any color, but any neutral color is definitely safe. And these hold the plate assemblies on the side of the engines. You can see one right here. This is quite an economical model to begin with, but as usual you can potentially save some money by utilizing Pick-a-Brick. The following 10 elements I found were usually cheaper either directly from LEGO or helped eliminate a store from Bricklink's algorithm, presumably due to the quantities required. I'll also say that for the cylinder dish and 2x2 curved slope pieces, it's nice to have new ones, as you don't need to worry about getting a yellow one from a Bricklink seller. As of mid-January 2023, these are all Pick-a-Brick standard elements, so they will take a bit longer to get to you than bestsellers. If you purchase this model, you get instructions and a parts list for both the Tantive 4 and the Liberator color schemes, as well as a number of scaled microfighters, including the Ghost and the Phantom, the Millennium Falcon, and the Rebel Starfighters. The Tantive 4 instructions are split across 2 files and contain 388 steps. Each part or subassembly you add in each step is outlined in bright red, and that generally works just fine. The build goes at a nice pace, and there's a good number of pieces in each step, such that it doesn't feel too slow by having too many pieces per step, or it doesn't feel too tedious, which can happen if there are too few pieces in each step. And without any pre-sorting of parts, which I didn't do yet again, but I definitely recommend because all white builds are a little bit difficult to pick out the part you need, the model took me probably about 8 hours start to finish. I did have 2 minor sequencing issues with the instructions. The 6 1x4 tiles you connect in steps 98 and 333 are extremely difficult to get in, and I believe they should be added earlier when assembling the engines themselves, and these tiles are right in between here. Basically, you add all the engines and then the instructions tell you to put these tiles in place after these are all connected. Modifying the instructions to make this a little easier, it definitely would require some more steps as you wouldn't be building all the engines the same at that point, but I found it more than a little frustrating to get these tiles in place after connecting the engines themselves. Step 157 has you installing the little section right beneath the topside cannon, but step 158 has you adding some tiles along either side of this corridor here. I believe these steps should simply be reversed, as you have to remove the subassembly that you just installed in step 157 to get this tile in step 158 into place. And there are just 2 very minor housekeeping things I found. Steps 95 and 328 instruct the builder to build another upper engine with a dark tan plate, or sorry, another engine with a dark tan plate, and I believe this is just a holdover from the Liberator instructions. For the Tantive 4, it should be dark red. And lastly, at the end of the Tantive 4 instructions, there's a render of the Liberator model. Overall, this is a very pleasant model to build. Everything just kind of goes very smoothly, and there's no frustrating steps one would likely be hung up on, or extremely fragile connections that might require multiple attempts. I think this is a very builder-friendly model that is suitable for entry-level MOC builders, and the result is sure to please any fan of the Corellian Corvette. This is a fairly large and heavy model, but it is decently stable, and this is almost certainly due to the strength of the Technic frame that runs front to back. The most comfortable place to hold it is definitely the lower docking station, and you can apply pressure here without worrying about it too much. You can even hold it like this. And the side docking rings are also stable enough to put your thumb on top here and kind of hold it right like that. You can get another, well, if I had held this the right way, you can give another hand underneath the middle section here for kind of a two-handed grip. But in general, if you're just moving this around, you can pick it up with one hand and it's not too much of an issue. These fins in the middle, the ones on the top, are not connected at both ends, so they do move around a little bit. The toe ball connection, of course, is pretty sturdy, so it's pretty unlikely it's going to come off, but these can get bumped. The fins on the bottom, however, are connected at both ends, so those are very strong. The majority of the stud connections for the lower engines are hollow studs. I'll show you what I mean here. So with the Technic bricks and the inverted slopes, you've got 4 out of 5 studs are hollow, and by design these have significantly less clutch strength than solid studs. So I have had the lower engines come off from time to time with minor bumps, but most of the time they're okay. You just don't want to be holding it by the engines themselves. I found the stand to be the most convenient thing to hold on to when picking the model up, but holding it right in the middle of the stand causes this middle part. There is a connection, or sorry, a gap right here. It causes the stand to kind of snap in half. Oops. Like that. So if you just add another plate to secure that connection, the stand is very durable. And I haven't had any issues since then. On the whole, this is a very sturdy model. Even the sub-assemblies that cover up the interior are connected with enough clutch that they don't fall off if you turn this upside down. And it's held together well enough that you can do some limited swooshing. You're only really limited by the size and weight of it. I didn't really know what to expect when I built this model, and it's the first one that I built from McPhatty. I'm very pleased with the end result and plan to keep this one on my shelf. Despite my general ambivalence to interiors, this one adds a lot to the model, and I'm glad I built it to the specifications. Combined with the reasonable price and the accessible building techniques, this is an easy model for me to recommend to anyone looking for a display-worthy Tantive 4. Like I said in the introduction, without any substitutions, Bricklink was giving me 4 stores and $170 before shipping and tax, or about $206 including shipping and tax. With the color substitutions, Bricklink was giving me 3 stores and $160 before shipping and tax, or about $190 including shipping and tax. With the color substitutions, plus buying the elements I recommended from Pick-a-Brick, the Pick-a-Brick elements happily came out to $36 and qualified for free shipping, as well as waiving the handling fee, and with tax it was about $38. For the rest of the elements, Bricklink gave me 3 stores and $128 without shipping and tax, or about $145 with shipping and tax. The grand total was $183. Instructions for this model and its Liberator counterpart are available for £9 on Rebreakable, which is about $11 in early February 2023. There will be a link to the Rebreakable page in the description. Thanks as always for watching my review of Ron McPhatty's Tantive 4. If you've built the model, you have something to share that I left out, or have a question about something I didn't cover, please leave them below in the comments. Remember to leave the video a like, subscribe to the channel, or follow me on Instagram if you haven't already, and I hope to see you back next time.